coming up on New Day at Arirang. The foreign ministers of South Korea and China held talks on Thursday on the sidelines of the G20 foreign ministers meeting in Bali. The two diplomats pledged close cooperation between the neighboring countries. Meanwhile, foreign ministers of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan are set to meet on Friday. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced Thursday he will step down as party leader. However, he will remain as the PM until a successor is chosen. The ruling People Power Party suspended the party membership of leader Lee Jun-suk for 6 months on Friday over allegations of sexual bribery and cover-up. The committee delivered the verdict after a near 8-hour meeting, despite Lee pleading his innocence.
Hello and welcome to New Day at Arirang. It's Friday, July 8th, 8 a.m. here in Seoul, South Korea. I'm Woo Young.
And I'm Lee Seung-jae. Thanks for joining us this morning, because over the next hour, we'll be giving you a look at some of the biggest headlines of the day and experts' insights on issues facing Korea and the rest of the world. Our top story this morning, foreign ministers of South Korea and China sat down for talks on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Indonesia on Thursday evening, where they agreed to a future of cooperation.
And a trilateral session between Seoul, Washington and Tokyo is also slated for Friday, with North Korea and its latest nuclear threats among items on the agenda. Kim Dami with our top story.
A friendship rooted in mutual respect and equal cooperation based on universal values and principles. That's the kind of Seoul-Beijing relations that South Korea's top diplomat voiced hope for while speaking to his Chinese counterpart for the first time on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali on Thursday.
South Korea and China will be able to develop a healthy and mature relationship for the next 30 years only when the two countries become good partners of equal cooperation while building mutual respect and trust.
The minister also emphasized a values-based diplomacy, pledging to play an active role in international cooperation to protect freedom, peace, and human rights. Nodding his head to Bak's remarks, the Chinese foreign minister pointed out that the launch of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration is the start of a fresh journey in Seoul-Beijing relations.
Bilateral relations can face realistic challenges, but we very much value our relationship with the new South Korean government.
According to Wang, China is ready to cooperate with South Korea so that the two countries can remain good neighbors, heading in a proper direction. The comment reflects Beijing's willingness to work with Seoul while keeping in check South Korea's participation on the worldwide stage, such as at the NATO summit and IPEF. Marking their 30th anniversary of friendship this year, the two officials agreed to consolidate economic cooperation and facilitate a more active face-to-face communication, including Bak's planned visit to China in the near future and Wang's trip to Seoul within the year. The G20 summit will continue on Friday with a trilateral meeting between the top diplomats of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. This will mark the South Korean foreign ministers' first face-to-face group meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi, another trilateral move to beef up their security cooperation amid Pyongyang's latest show of nuclear ambitions. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Years of spending to fight the pandemic and prop up the economy have weakened the government's fiscal health. The Yoon administration is looking to adopt some belt-tightening measures, likely making a huge shift from the previous government. Yoon Jung-min outlines what to expect.
The government needs to tighten its belt first, as it should lead by example. Key message from President Yoon Suk-yeol Thursday at his first financial strategy meeting as his administration faces a national debt soaring at an alarming pace.
정부는 성역 없는 고강도 지출 구조 조정으로 국민들의 혈세가 허투루 사용되지 않도록 해야 합니다. 절약한 재원은 꼭 필요한데 써야 합니다.
As the president raised alarm on the nation's fiscal health, saying state coffers have dramatically deteriorated in the last 5 years, the new Yoon administration unveiled a 5-year plan to manage state finances, a policy shift from years of expansionary fiscal policy. Various COVID-19 economic stimulus, such as cash handouts, had led South Korea's debt-to-GDP ratio to increase to 50% this year from 36% in 2017. According to the new plan, the government will normalize COVID-19 related spendings, sell off unnecessary assets held by public enterprises, and more strictly manage its employment quota and salary.
취약계층이 이 어려운 경제 위기를 잘 극복할 수 있도록 공공부문을 긴축해서 조성된 자금으로 이분들을 더 두텁게 지원해야 합니다.
He also called on the need to watch out for possible adverse effects of government finances on the markets, meaning higher interest rates may undermine private investments. For the very first time, the National Finance Strategy meeting took place at a local university in central South Korea, not at a government complex, and invited business leaders from various fields, such as the chief producer of SM Entertainment and young college students. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Amid concerns that the previous administration let public debt get out of control, the new government's looking to keep the debt-to-GDP ratio in check in the mid-50% range. Ji-young has more on the policy plan.
Mid-50% by 2027. It's debt-to-GDP ratio, that is. South Korea is tightening its belt and reducing government spending to slow a rise in debt to keep the debt-to-GDP rate at that in the next 5 years. Seoul's finance ministry said it'll also cut the ratio of fiscal deficit to GDP to 3% or lower from about 5% set for this year as it released the new administration's fiscal policy plan on Thursday.
The biggest difference from the previous administrations is that we are using the managed fiscal balance to set the limit instead of the total fiscal balance. Also, the fiscal rule will be simplified, so it's more like what other advanced countries use.
The move marks a departure from the expansionary fiscal policy that the previous administration had maintained over the past few years in a bid to prop up economic growth and cope with the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, one of the major reforms will be in education as the number of young students are falling. Rather than elementary and middle schools, there'll be more financial grants allocated to high schools and universities. The government announced its investment strategy to increase efficiency and encourage private sector-led investment. For investment in R&D, it's going to focus on strategic areas essential to national and economic security. For small and medium companies, rather than giving out small amounts of support to all businesses, money will be allocated based on market demand. Also, the government will abolish any unnecessary regulations on them. There'll also be more support and deregulation for universities to bring in students and training to create jobs to cultivate more professionals in key high-tech industries. The government will prepare a new fiscal rule based on the plan by early September and put into effect as soon as the legislation process is complete in Parliament. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Now, the ruling People Power Party's chair, Lee Jun-suk, has been suspended from the party following disciplinary action by the party's own ethics committee over his alleged attempt to cover up a sexual bribery case. Now, he becomes the first chair of a ruling party to be suspended from his own party. Lee Kyung-eun has the details.
Following 8 hours of marathon discussion, the People Power Party's Independent Ethics Committee decided to temporarily suspend the membership of the party chair Lee Jun-suk, who's involved in a sexual bribery scandal.
The members agreed to suspend Chair Lee Jun-suk from holding party membership for 6 months.
This is the first time in South Korean history that a ruling party chair has faced such a punishment. However, as the case is still under investigation, the committee made clear that the decision was not based on the scandal itself, but Lee's alleged attempt to destroy related evidence and his failure to maintain the standards required of party leaders. Yi has so far denied the allegations, and prior to the decision being made, Yi faced a committee to refute the allegations himself.
I thoroughly explained for an extended time and answered questions clearly from my perspective.
In the end, Yi's denials were not accepted. The committee concluded that an aide of Yi's tried to cover up the scandal by arranging an investment pledge to the business person who offered sexual services to the chairman, and that the chairman indeed knew about it. The aide, Kim Chul-gun, received a 2-year suspension from the party. With the latest decision, Yi's chairmanship is halted immediately, and it could possibly prompt the party to elect a new leader, as Yi's chairmanship officially set to end next June. However, there's also a chance that Yi will appeal the decision, given that he has previously said he will not accept any punishment. Regardless of his response, the decision will inevitably harm Yi's political career and fuel uncertainties within the party for the time being. Yoon, Arirang News.
Now, after surviving scandal after scandal, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has finally resigned. Now, Johnson announced his decision after dramatically losing the support of a host of conservative lawmakers. Kim Yo-sun has more.
Boris Johnson has decided to resign as British Prime Minister under heavy pressure from lawmakers within his own party. But he says he will stay until his successor was chosen, and explained that an announcement will come next week about the timetable for choosing the new Prime Minister. Speaking in front of 10 Downing Street in London on Thursday, Johnson thanked the British public for the support they have given him.
Above all, I want to thank you, the British public, for the immense privilege that you have given me. And I want you to know that from now on until the new Prime Minister is in place, your interests will be served and the government of the country will be carried on.
Johnson also hailed the achievements the country has made under his leadership, from Brexit to delivering the fastest COVID-19 vaccine rollout in Europe. The decision to step down comes after dozens of officials, aides, and members of his cabinet quit his government, saying they could no longer serve under his leadership. The scandal that ultimately ended his nearly 3-year premiership was triggered by Johnson's decision to promote a lawmaker, Chris Pincher, to a position of power, even though he knew Pincher had been the subject of a sexual harassment complaint. Many conservative lawmakers, as well as members of the public, also viewed Johnson as untrustworthy, with a poll conducted by a research firm showing this week that nearly 70% of Britons believe Johnson should resign. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Now again, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson resigned as the leader of the UK and the leader of the Conservative Party following a string of resignations by his ministers and, of course, key officials amid the latest ethical scandal to engulf him. Johnson stepped down as Tory leader effective immediately, but plans to remain in number 10 while his party chooses his successor.
So today we discuss what's ahead for the UK and where this resignation leaves the nation, which is grappling with a cost of living crisis. For this, we connect with Mark Shannon, Head of Politics and International Relations at the University of Reading. Lovely to see you, Mark. Thank you for joining us. And, well, a very hectic day for you, I imagine. A lot going on. And, well, after surviving a series of scandals, including Partygate, of course, it looks like Boris's luck finally ran out. And the final straw proves to be revelations about Johnson's awareness of the complaints made against Chris Pincher, the Conservative Deputy Chief Whip, of course, who stepped down after allegations that he groped 2 men at a private club. And, well, Mr. Johnson's Health Secretary and the Chancellor, they were the first to resign on Tuesday night, leading 57 others. But 24 hours ago, it seemed that Boris might still put up a fight. So what happened?
Well, one has to consider Boris Johnson as pretty unique in politics. He's made part of rubber, part of Teflon. He just keeps deflecting and bouncing back. And he was elected by the British populace because he was a bit of fun at a very tough time when Brexit was grinding everybody down. And he's a brilliant campaigner who won an election for the Tories and delivered an 80-seat majority, which is a huge majority. But over the last 3 years, all of that goodwill and all of that good effort has dissipated. And it just got to the point that drip, 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 ministers were leaving on the hour, almost every hour, and then every few minutes, to the point that very early yesterday morning, he realized he just couldn't go on. There was not a government left for him to govern. And the party had told him very, very clearly that they no longer had any trust in him whatsoever. He thought he could wriggle out of it, but he just ran out of road.
So what we know is that Johnson wants to stay in power until his, of course, successor is chosen. But I mean, several of his MPs want him to leave immediately, saying that, given the number of resignations from his government, he doesn't have the authority to lead. So is there going to be an interim leader? What comes after all this?
Okay, it's actually unlikely that there will be an interim leader because there's simply no device to make that happen. The party rules state that the current prime minister stays in office. He's not in power, but he remains in office until a successor is chosen. What they're trying to do now is to speed up the process. There's going to be a very wide field of contenders. They'll try and whittle those down to 2 within the next 2 weeks before Parliament breaks up for the summer recess. And then before September the 5th, when Parliament reconvenes, they will have an election among Conservative Party members, so that by the time Parliament comes back early in September, there will be a new Conservative leader, de facto Prime Minister. It is unlikely that anything huge is going to happen during August, when Johnson will be still supposedly in charge. And what they will try and do is restrict what he can do. There will be no new policy happening over the next 6-8 weeks.
And while the health minister, who's now resigned, he told Mr. Johnson that the party, the Conservative Party rather, needs humility, grip and a new direction. But it's clear that under Mr. Johnson's leadership, the situation is not going to change. And while the series of scandals that hit not only the PM but the Tories has been very damaging for the ruling party. And well, what does the future hold for the Tories?
The Tories need a complete reset. Johnson's fall has been entirely of his own making. He is untrustworthy. He's been found not to be trusted by his own MPs, by his wider party, and now by the country. There is no longer any faith in him. We've lost a lot of trust in politics. He has tarnished the reputation of Parliament. He's really trashed process across the country. So the Conservatives, if they want to be elected at the next general election, have to show that they are trustworthy, that people actually can do business with them, that they are going to represent the country to the highest possible degree, unlike Johnson, who pretty much now, his reputation in the UK is that he was only in this for himself. Now the party has to show that it's actually in politics, in the business of government, for the wider population.
Just very quickly here, how are the British people kind of feeling about this leadership vacuum, especially what's going on right now globally, right? The cost of living crisis, and also what does it also mean for the aftermath of Brexit?
Well, there is a sense that the Conservative Party will still govern. And there's actually quite a collective sigh of relief across the country that Johnson is gone. In the minds of the population, he's already history. We want a new leader in place fairly quickly, hopefully, by the end of the summer. And then it's about trying to get the UK working again. At the moment, there's a bit of a state of economic paralysis. Things are not good. And we need new policy, new action, and a new sense of enthusiasm for the business of government from the ruling party.
Well, thank you so much for your insights today, Professor Mark Shanahan at the University of Reading.
Thank you.
Now, back here in the nation, demand for electricity in South Korea hit an all-time high on Thursday amid a scorching heat wave nationwide.
The Korea Power Exchange says that the country's maximum power demand reached nearly 93,000 megawatts as of 5 p.m. Thursday. This exceeds the previous record of around 92,000 megawatts set in late July 2018. The reserve electricity ratio, which is supposed to stay above 10% to ensure a stable power supply and in case of contingencies, dropped to 7.2%. Now it's time for Onpoint, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. The Busan International Fantastic Film Festival, or BIFAN, kicked off on Thursday, the 26th time that the film festival has taken place.
That's right, with the festival going on until the 17th of this month. What are some of the key films to check out this year? Well, to find out, we connect with Jae So, professor and filmmaker at the Seoul Institute of the Arts. Very good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning.
So I guess the big question with so many international film festivals happening here in Korea, what makes BIFAN so special amongst, I guess, all the film festivals?
Well, Busan Film Festival is called the Fantastic Film Festival, and it's basically a celebration of genre movies. So it's like horror, thriller, mystery, fantasy, and this festival is in the 26th year this year, and they are very famous for also paying a lot of attention to Asian cinema from the Far East and Southeast Asia. And there's also a network of Asian fantastic films, NAF, which launched in 2008 to help the production and development of genre films. And so there's a lot of industry people that come. And this year, it launched yesterday, July 7th. It'll go on till the July 17th. And it's after 2 years of COVID, they were doing it offline most of the time, but this is the first time it's in person. And the slogan this year is "Stay Strange." And they'll have really cool events like Halloween in July and parties like that.
And Professor, well, this year there are 16 jury members that have been appointed, and among them are some very notable names. So can you tell us more about them, please?
Yes, the 16 jury members this year, it's a very stellar sort of members this year, and basically it's comprised of film critics, filmmakers, festival programmers, and actors. Some notable directors are Japanese director Harada Masato. There's also Gina Kim and Kim Kyung-wook. These are film directors. And also the famous actor Shim Hae-jin and Lee Dong-gu is also a jury member. And then we have producer Kang Hae-jung, who basically, she's the producer for movies like The Berlin File and Escape from Mogadishu. And we have also some famous basically directors from international film festivals. Monica Garcia, the general manager of Sitges, a very famous fantastic film festival in Spain, and also Lisa Dreyer, a director of Fantastic Fest in the United States. It's backed by Alamo Drafthouse, which is really famous, and then Anderson Larsson, a Lund Fantastic Film Festival director from Sweden as well.
I mean, in the end, right, it is a film festival, so I guess the big question is, what are some of the films to really watch out for in this film festival?
Well, this year they have a total of something like 268 titles from 49 countries, and 80 of these films are all world premieres, which means it's the first time you'll see them. And there are 20 international premieres, and I would say some notable films are like the opening film, which played yesterday. You could see it again. It's called Men. It's directed by Alex Garland, and this was a big hit at the Caan Film Festival Directors Fortnight this year. And basically, it's another horror film by a director of Ex Machina and Annihilation. These are huge films. And this director also wrote the screenplay for, famous movies like 28 Days Later, Sunshine and the Beach, all Danny Boyle movies. And the closing film is a movie by Jung Bum-sik called New Normal. And this film centered around 4 days of multiple characters where basically, because of COVID, there's kind of in solitary confinement. So this director who directed a horror film called Gonjiam, it's coming up with a new film. So that's sort of interesting. One of the cool things is the opening film is actually an R-rated film. So I think in the festival's sort of canon of films, it was interesting. And also we have competitive sections divided between local and foreign films. For the international Busan Choice features, there are 10 films such as Alien Artist by Seiyo Hoya, And basically, there's a film that I think is really interesting. It's an Indonesian horror film called The Womb, and also a famous director from Australia, Goran Stolevski, has a movie called You Won't Be Alone, which is also featured here. There's also Korean Fantastic Features, which includes about 10 films locally made. And so there's a movie by Cho Kwang-jin called Cabriolet, A Good Boy by Son Kyung-won. And basically, all these films are just really fantastic to watch. And this year, for their actor that they're kind of basically singling out is the actor Seol Kyung-gu, who's one of the great actors of Korean cinema. So you can see a retrospective as movies like, Peppermint Candy, Oasis, and, Shilmido.
Sounds like there's a lot of fantastic films to be binge-watched. And, well, Professor, thank you so much for your insights today.
My pleasure.
And that wraps up the first half of New Day at Arirang.
That's right. Stick around. Coming up next in the second half, we have a coverage on, of course, many of things out there, but also why is there this obsession for body profile photo sessions turning unhealthy? Well, we'll find out in the second half, so we'll be back in just a moment.
Share South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduce a Korean new day. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
넌 볼 수 없고 가질 수 없어 뚝뚝 눈물 쏟아내도 뜨거운 자태 한번 비추지 않고 내게만 가치란 그녀는 유명한 서대별 다 어딨나 In your eyes 걔와 함께면 넌 디스토피아 내 발걸음 따라오면 유토피아 나의 나 I feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Forever.
And welcome back to the second half of New Day at Arirang. Good news for South Korea's tech giants, especially Samsung Electronics, whose estimates in its Q2 sales and operating profits to rise sharply, mainly thanks to tech giant's semiconductor business.
And number 2 tech giant LG Electronics also saw very encouraging figures driven by a rise in the auto parts business. That's according to our Lee Dae-yeon.
Despite ongoing geopolitical issues and global inflation, Samsung Electronics has logged its highest ever projected sales for the second quarter. In an earnings guidance report released on Thursday, the company says sales estimates from April to June amount to a record $58.9 billion, up almost 21% from the same period last year. The tech giant also expects an 11.3% on-year increase in operating profit, amounting to roughly $10.7 billion. This would mark the company's third highest second quarter profits ever. Analysts say the earnings were largely driven by operating profits from Samsung's semiconductor business and expect the company's profits for semiconductors to stand at around $7.6 billion. A high $1 exchange rate also appears to be contributing to earnings. For example, in the first quarter, the $1 exchange rate rose almost 2% compared to the previous quarter, which brought profits of some $229 million. The exchange rate is expected to also result in $635 million in operating profits in the second quarter. One analyst says he has a positive outlook for Samsung's sales in the third quarter.
Despite falling DRAM chip prices, Samsung sales in the third quarter will increase as display sales recover and a new foldable phone is set to be released during the period. But operating profits are likely to remain due to a drop in chip prices.
LG Electronics also posted sales far better than the market consensus. It projected a rise in quarterly sales of a little over $15 billion, an increase of 15% compared to the same period a year earlier. This is largely driven by a sales rise in LG's auto parts. However, the estimated operating profit came to a record of about $610 million, which is down over 12% on year. Industry insiders say this is caused by a drop in TV sales and a rising cost of logistics and raw materials. Lee Hyun, Arirang News.
The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite saw their fourth successive higher closes on Thursday. The S&P 500 gained 57.54 points, or 1.50%, while the Nasdaq added 259.49 points, or 2.28%. Energy stocks led the gains on the S&P, with Exxon rising 3.2% and Occidental Petroleum gaining nearly 4%. Chip makers also boosted the tech sector following Samsung Electronics' strong second quarter results. Now, the rise follows the release on Wednesday of the minutes of the Federal Reserve's June policy meeting, in which the Fed hinted that it would temper its rate hikes should they start to affect growth.
Tanned, leaned and sculpted as they preen at the camera, a growing number of young South Koreans have been posting their so-called body profiles on social media. Pictures and videos flaunting the process and results of sculpting their bodies. Showing off a sporty physique appears to be the latest trend for both men and women in Korea, who, despite not being professional athletes, work out intensively for months to achieve that perfect shot of their bodies. The trend seems to have emerged and really intensified throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, with influencers fueling the move to look hot and healthy. But as more and more people go all out to capture the perfect body profile, the desire to look fit has turned into a rather unhealthy phenomenon for those who excessively diet and train. Today on Dialogue This Week, we discuss the highly hashtag body profile phenomenon in South Korea, as well as other countries seeing similar movements to look fit. And joining us for this discussion, we welcome Cho Do-kyun, author of As I Run and ambassador of F45 Korea and a sports influencer, as well as Dr. Elizabeth Snowbrick, clinical psychologist and clinical director at Adaptable Human Solutions. A very warm welcome to you both. And well, first of all, Do-kyun, now, what are body profiles exactly for some of our viewers who may not know what it is exactly, and how has it really taken off as a trend among the younger generations in Korea?
Yes, it is an abbreviation for body profile picture. The body profile picture is literally taking pictures of the body using lighting and makeup that would emphasize the healthy body to stand out. Body profiles were originally started as bodybuilding or weight training professionals to celebrate or verify their bodies. It was not something that ordinary people set as a goal. It is understood as the culture of the MZ generation. As a result, there are cases where weight training beginners suffer from various injuries or even mental illness while building a body forcibly in a short period of time.
Well, it does definitely take discipline, it seems, but I've also noticed that on social media there are more and more people posting these kind of pictures. And well, now Elizabeth, is this a common phenomenon happening around the world? I mean, we've seen bodybuilders before, we've seen influencers on bodybuilding and training, particularly over the stretch of the pandemic. But what's unique about Korea's current hype compared to other countries?
Yes, I would say that this practice is still by far most common in South Korea, but it has definitely spread across the globe, like you said, during the COVID pandemic. What I would say is most unique with Korea is, first of all, the vast number. It's something that is far more common that we see, like we've seen over 2 million hashtags on Instagram. It is something that is a phenomenon across the entire country. What we're also seeing is in other countries, they are starting to catch wind of the body profile, but rather than getting the professional body shoot, spending the time and the money and making the reservation for the professional shoots, it's more common in some of the other countries to have friends take the picture or take selfies or have others take the picture rather than the quality and the professional shoots that we're seeing. And in Korea in particular, like you mentioned, it's something that has become a phenomenon among non-celebrities, non-athletes. So it's something that's become very popular in the general public.
Exactly, even people I know just seeing very professionally shot photos of them. They look like headshots, right? So that's definitely not something that we see everywhere in the world, quite unique to Korea. And it's quite surprising really, Togyeon, because, well, in the past, Koreans seem to appreciate paleness and thinness as a sort of common beauty standard. But would you say that beauty standards have begun to shift? And how did this change really begin among the young generation?
Since around 2019, as the media and magazines emphasize the fantasy of men and women in good shape, the general population is also increasing. Particularly, it is common to take body profile just to post on social media. Among young people in their 20s and 30s, there is a strong tendency to view them as a finished product of self-management, and usually they set up a shooting schedule first and then exercise for a short period according to the schedule.
And Elizabeth, well, it does seem that these people who post themselves online, having worked out, having sculpted their bodies, they're right to be proud of their bodies. They've worked very, very hard for them. But what is the psychology and the motivation really driving them to share videos and photos of themselves working out and really having sculpted their bodies to perfection?
Well, humans by nature are social creatures, and we have this need and desire to make connections. And social media has created an opportunity for people to make connections during times like COVID, where we couldn't make connections otherwise. And part of the need for this is to be liked, and sharing the videos and photos of working out creates a positive feedback. And that creates feelings of belonging. It creates a boost in self-esteem. And then other people witness this phenomenon and they see the positive attention and they desire that similar attention. And then that creates that habit that we're seeing in this trend where more and more people want to receive that positive attention and that boost and that feeling of belonging and that connection.
And Togyeon, well, you are already working in the sports industry and you're a sports influencer, but we're seeing people who aren't sports professionals, they're starting to become quite extreme with all the training and the very highly restricted diet, of course. So looking at this sort of extreme level that people are taking things, how do people in your line of business really interpret this body profile hype?
First, self-motivation. It is said that there is a sense of accomplishment that you feel when you set a goal every moment and achieve that goal. Second, self-satisfaction. People say that it is meaningful to leave a record of the days of youth or the most beautiful moment in their lives. Third, it is a trend that especially the youngsters cannot be left behind. Sometimes they think, I want to do it because my friends do it, or so I have to do it because it's trendy. Fourth, they see it as a reward or keeping a record. It is an era where it is cultural to leave a record and take a body profile is to show off one's efforts. It's no different from winning a medal in a marathon or taking a picture at a famous tourist destination.
And it certainly does seem that people are not just doing it for the approval of others, but also for themselves. As you said, some interviews with people show that they want to highlight the best years of their lives, as they say. And well, of course, South Korea being very susceptible to trends, the general population, this kind of trend has taken off very fast. But it's quite concerning, Taegeun, because some people are seeing some serious side effects, such as dietary disorders and also self-awareness issues. So what exactly are the main concerns that we have right here?
That's right. Due to a too tough eating plan, there are many cases where they suffer from bulimia or anorexia after taking a body profile picture. Also, in many cases, they are not satisfied with the result of the body profile, so they repeat it several times. Often, this is also referred to as addiction.
And what are your thoughts on this, Elizabeth? I mean, there were already a lot of concerns about body image and body dysmorphia, anorexia. The list really stretches on. What are the possible positive impacts and also the dangers of taking these body profile pictures?
Well, for some, there can be positives. There can be a sense of accomplishment that was mentioned. Also, it can create an opportunity for healthy eating habits for some to get into shape. Perhaps they hadn't focused on eating healthy or exercising previously, so this can give them an incentive to do that. I would say the most important thing is that it's done with the advice of professionals. So a nutritionist, a doctor, a personal trainer. When it's done over a period of time and the focus is really on healthy habits and really achieving a sense of accomplishment and a goal of being your best self, I think that can be a positive for many people. It's when it crosses over to the dangerous side effects that were mentioned previously, where we can run into some issues of eating disorders, we can run into issues of depression and anxiety. And these are long-lasting mental health side effects that require professional help. And so it's very, very important that if someone is going to engage in this, that they do use the advice of professionals and take it slow and very mindfully.
And Elizabeth, would you say it's rather easy for someone to really fall down that rabbit hole of falling into depression or just becoming overly self-conscious to the point of developing an eating disorder?
I would say it is a slippery slope, especially when you're posting the pictures online for the critique of others. And when you're looking for that external validation rather than the internal satisfaction, it really does open the door, because there are people who are going to make negative comments. There are people who are going to point out flaws. And that can really open the door for some of those feelings that can go down the path of eating disorders, body dysmorphia, becoming obsessed with calorie intake, which can lead to feelings of depression and feelings of anxiety and feelings of helplessness. And it is a slippery slope. And so, again, it needs to be done very carefully and monitored very closely by professionals.
And Taegeun, now there are also concerns that people are overtraining. They're working out too much over a very short period of time. So what are ways to exercise appropriately and also healthily?
Well, as a runner who has been running steadily for 13 years, I believe that exercise should be a process, not a goal. I think that one of the abundant pleasures of life should be exercising. Personally, my running motto is run for life. We may feel frustrated or unhappy because we over-exercise and injure ourselves. We should be able to feel pleasure in just enjoying the exercise itself rather than thinking about grades, records, or goals. It's good to play with friends, and it's good to try new sports.
Well, it sounds like there needs to be a good balance between trying to look healthy and be healthy at the same time. And Elizabeth, how should we strike up this kind of leveled approach?
I think, as mentioned, it's important that it's a lifestyle change, that it's not the short-term goal of I'm going to lose as much weight as fast as I can and get as fit as I can. That the goal is to really make healthier habits over time, as was mentioned. I think that's an excellent point, that it should be a change in behavior over time rather than a short-term goal. Some very important things to pay attention to is how you feel after the event as well. Mentioned it's important to have professional advice, but after the event is when, or after the photo shoot is when we start to see potentially some of that slippery slope that was previously mentioned. So if there's an obsession over food intake, how much food, how many calories, or weight, if there is difficulty in restricting what is eaten, if there's what we call binging, which is once you're able to have a less restrictive diet, you find yourself overeating foods that you maybe wouldn't have eaten to the amount that you're eating. Obsessing over body imperfections, really honing in on certain parts of the body that you don't like and obsessing over them. Frequently weighing oneself, over exercising to the point of extreme where it becomes unhealthy. Changes in mood, changes in behavior that's noticed by others, difficulty sleeping, feelings of sadness or anxiety that weren't there prior. I think those are all really big warning signs to watch for. And it's really important that not just the individual watch for them, but also the people who are in that individual's life. So if you know somebody who's a friend or a loved one or a family member who is going through, has made the decision to have a body profile shoot, that they are watching for some of these signs after. Because it might be difficult for the individual to recognize that slippery slope until it becomes too late. And so it's important that the loved ones are really monitoring that and getting the help if they need it.
Right, well, as good as body profiles may look, it's of course very important to be healthy and not just simply look healthy. Well, this is where we're going to have to end the conversation today, but that was Cho Do-kyun, author of As I Run, ambassador of F45 Korea and sports influencer, as well as Dr. Elizabeth Snowbrick, clinical psychologist and clinical director at Adaptable Human Solutions. Thank you both so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, for a look at news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning to you, Matthew.
Good morning to you guys.
Hi, Matt. Now let's start in the US and the federal sentencing of Derek Chauvin over the death of George Floyd.
Right, Soo-young. The former police chief officer Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 21 years in prison by a federal court for violating George Floyd's civil rights. The judge called his actions, quote, simply wrong and offensive. The ruling on Thursday follows the killing of Floyd on May 25th, 2020 in Minneapolis, when Chauvin fatally pinned Floyd to the pavement for over 9 minutes, causing breathing difficulties. Floyd's death sparked global protests over police brutality and racism. Chauvin is already behind bars after being sentenced to 22 years in prison in June 2021 for second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. His two sentences will run concurrently, and he will be moved from state prison to federal prison. Meanwhile, in Russia, U.S. basketball athlete Brittany Griner has pleaded guilty to drug possession charges. Her lawyers confirmed on Thursday that she had pled guilty in court on the second day of her trial. The two-time Olympic basketball gold medalist faces up to 10 years in prison. She was arrested at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport in February after police said they found vape canisters containing cannabis oil in her luggage. Griner told the court through an interpreter that she had acted unintentionally due to packing in a hurry for her trip. The trial has been adjourned until July 14th, when Griner is due to deliver her testimony. The U.S. State Department has classified Griner's detainment as wrongful, while supporters of the 31-year-old have voiced concerns she's being used as a political pawn amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Actor James Caan, best known for his Oscar-nominated role as Sonny Corleone in the 1970s movie The Godfather, died on Wednesday at the age of 82. The news broke on Thursday through the actor's official Twitter account and was later confirmed by his agent. No cause has been given and Caan's family has requested privacy. Born to German immigrant parents in 1940 in New York, James Edmund Caan was raised in Queens with two brothers. Despite drug problems and minor brushes with the law, he forged a long and successful career with iconic roles in The Godfather, Elf and Misery, amongst others. The Godfather co-star Al Pacino expressed his condolences in an emailed statement, highlighting Caan's brilliant acting and directing and saying that he will be missed. 22-time Grand Slam tennis champion Rafael Nadal has withdrawn from Wimbledon. He said in a press conference on Thursday that he had injured his abdomen. The Spanish tennis player was due to meet Australian Nick Kyrgios for a semi-final match on Friday. Nadal's forfeit means that Kyrgios is headed straight to the final on July 10th, where he will face the winner of the match between Novak Djokovic and Cameron Norrie. Nadal said he expects to recover within 3 or 4 weeks and that his grueling 4-hour and 20-minute match against Taylor Fritz in the quarterfinals had worsened his injury.
Good morning. On and off monsoon rain continues on Friday. Parts of Jeollado, Gyeongsangdo provinces and Jeju Island could see 10 to 50 millimeters of rainfall through late this afternoon. And you know, a couple of degrees Celsius does make a big difference at a time like this. In fact, those of us in the capital can look forward to temperatures going below 30 degrees this afternoon with a heat advisory finally being lifted for now. But those in Gyeongsangdo province and surrounding regions need to brace for another scorcher as highs will continue to hover at a sizzling 35 degrees Celsius. Well, last night's rain did help to cool things off a bit in the capital area, but the rest of the country had more overnight heat. Well, highs will be a couple degrees lower this afternoon across Korea, but humidity will remain at 100%. Gwangju and Daejeon will be topping out at 32 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Now, expect to have cloudy and muggy conditions over the weekend, then monsoon rain returns early next week. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe. That wraps up our newscast for this hour, but we'll be back next week for our Monday's edition of New Day Arirang.
Thanks always for joining us this morning, and do stick around for more updates throughout the day. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and as always, take care.
Okay,